Here is the summary of the first page of the first mimer on Sefer Shmos, which begins with the opening pasuk that lists out all of the bnei Yisroel, and it contrasts it with this similar but mildly different list back in parshas Vayigash. And he uses this as an opportunity to talk about what is the ultimate objective of an neshama coming into this world. And the paradigm is the contrast and comparison to the slavery in Egypt resulting in Matan Torah, in the giving of the Torah, and the experience of Galus to this point, which will result in the giving of Pnimius HaTorah. And we started to describe some of the details of how, even in the Nigla, even in the Gemara, it uses the model of what our ancestors went through in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, as how we go through our struggle to understand Torah, to identify godliness. And when we do that, when we follow those procedures, which have a characteristic of overlapping, we are able to discover more than just the pragmatic instructional. We can actually discover the godliness. And we talked about why a neshama comes into this world. Seemingly, it's better off to be up in heaven. And our explanation that it comes into this world to give it an opportunity to have a closeness with Hashem that it could never experience in heaven, even though it doesn't look that way immediately. It appears to be just a distancing from godliness, and yet that distancing empowers it to come even closer. And this is true as we see that Avram Avinu was given a choice between the people enduring Gehenna or enduring slavery, and he chose slavery, both of which achieve a similar objective in that they smelt away the impurities and the distractions that allow us or prevent us from being close with Hashem. Now, since the neshama, as lofty as it is still a created being, it needs to be spoken to in a language which it can comprehend. And as such, Hashem goes through the great effort to encase himself within attainable God formats of Torah that are portals of entry for a neshama. And again, no matter what, the neshama is still a limited entity, to be able to have an opportunity to be close with God. Just as Hashem overcomes his basic identification of self, of unlimited to become limited, we too have to overcome the basic identification of ourselves as limited beings to become unlimited, which is the quality called bittul. And we see this based on the description in Bereshis that a river went out from Eden, from sort of the essence of Hashem, in an attempt to water the garden, to make Hashem making himself accessible to us, as indicated that the word garden is the numerical value of 53, representing the 53 Torah portions, which are an opportunity for us, if we will have that chachma, that koyachma, that willingness to go way beyond ourselves, not just to compartmentalize more information, but to put aside anything we've ever known before. As we say, we will have total bittul. And then we went on to describe, based on a pasuk in Shir Hashirim that uses an analogy of Torah to the queen, that just as in the development of a child, the queen has eaten food that has given her body the health to be receptive to the king's contribution. The combination of the two are able to thus produce a healthy child. Well, in a similar fashion, Hashem gives us Torah. We engage our intellect to decipher its inner meaning, its great message. And through that, we have a full-on combination of Hashem's contribution in our analysis that results in a proper understanding of Torah. And the king-queen analogy of the coupling of the gift of Hashem and the analysis of the people, it underscores the constancy of the relationship between the two, which is the only method to allow the full development of the child. In this sense, the neshama benefits from being here in this physical world and having a closeness with Hashem that it would otherwise never attain were it to remain only up in Shemayim. This is the short summary of the second page of the Mimer on Shmos. reminder that the Alter Rebbe is working off the pasuk in Shir Hashirim that says there were 60 queens and 80 pilagshim, concubines, and an infinite number, an innumerable amount of young maidens. And as it's explained, that this is a reference to the queens are the Mishnahs, the pilagshim, the concubines are the brises, and the infinite number of young girls are the halachas. And we explained that the level of bittul that Moshe Rabbeinu embodies when he receives the Torah from Sinai is embedded within the Mishnah, and therefore the Mishnah is not filled with debate and analysis and questions and answers. It's more just the straight up godliness that is brought to it. And it's comparable to the relationship that is absolute and certain and constant between the queen and the king. Then you have the level called the brises, which are less clear. The brisa, again, meaning outside. It was taught outside the yeshiva. And this is comparable to the relationship between the king and the Vayigash, which is more secretive and sporadic. That is, it's unclear what their relationship is. And that's why its godliness is less evident, like the relationship between the king and the concubine is less evident and less clear. And the idea being that the king represents this masculine quality that is infinite, that needs to be developed, like in the development of a child. It's contributed to the mother, and then it is fleshed out into a full entity. So this quality, which is chachma, which is again not about smarts or IQ or information accumulation, it is rather about a basic receptivity to the infinite idea, is manifest in the female. So in the Mishnah, it's the queen, which is a very close and constant and obvious relationship, which is the obvious and evident godliness and clarity in the Mishnah. In the Vayigash, it's less so. And then you get to the young maidens who haven't yet had this impact of the male contribution from the king, but they are ready for it. And these are the halachas where we have to do the liban hilchasa. We have to whiten them out. We have to pick through all the confusion and uncertainty and discover the halacha. And this is ultimately, as it's illustrated by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, where he wears the white garment. This is the mission of the Jewish people. So now we can understand what the Zohar tells us, that the purpose of Torah and mitzvahs is to order and correct the names of Hashem. We know there's the different names of Hashem. The halacha represents it. You can't erase them and so forth. What is the purpose of the names of Hashem? Since Hashem is infinite, and yet it's his desire to create a finite world. So Hashem compresses himself into the finite names, each name representing the manner in which Hashem is expressing himself at that moment. So Kel is God expressing himself as Chesed, and Elokim as Geulah. So Hashem wishes to create a world predicated on Chesed, so he creates the world through Kel. God wishes to express himself through Geulah, orderliness, so he expresses himself through Elokim. And we, in turn, take the Torah and mitzvahs, and we can become connected with Hashem through our acts of chesed and our acts of Geulah that are aligned with godliness. Ultimately, though, beyond just the specifics of how we match up our chesed with God's chesed and our Geulah with God's Geulah, there is this ultimate objective to reach the Shmei HaGadol, the infinite name of Hashem. Not the way that Hashem manifests himself through these little touch points, but rather through that infinite level. And this is what Hashem is referring to when he tells Moshe Rabbeinu that he appeared to Avram, but his name Havai did not make known to Avram, because Avram did not have Matan Torah, did not have this access point. And this is what is given through Matan Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu, and again by extension to us. So now at the end of this page, Alter Rebbe goes back to the beginning of the Mimer where he asked the question, why does Torah have to say these are the names of Yaakov and his children who came down to Mitzrayim, and then enumerate them already in parshas Vayigash, when in fact they came to Mitzrayim? Hashem already told us their names. So now we understand that Yaakov represents the infinity of Hashem, and his wives, Rachel, and all of his children represent Klal Yisroel, like the Jewish people are called Rachel. And each of the children, the 12 of them, represent one of the ways that Hashem's four-lettered name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei can be reorganized in one of the 12 different permutations. And this is what comes into Mitzrayim, that from the place of holiness, because we have the prep of the Geulah, that we have this level of infinite godliness that is manifest through Yaakov, who represents habaim, and his wives and children, who represent the various ways in which godliness is manifest in this physical world, come down into Mitzrayim, into the most antagonistic circumstance, in order to bring that level of godliness. And although it's not evident down here, it does ultimately become that way when Mashiach will come, and the godliness that is buried within Mitzrayim will be revealed. And this is alluded to again in the four-letter name of Hashem, the Yud representing this infinite quality, like the infinite characteristic of the letter Yud that can be stretched and shaped into any letter. The Hey, which represents the soft-spoken word through our enunciation of the words of Torah and Tefillah. The Vav, which represents the 6 orders of the Mishnah, and again followed by another Hey, that when we effectuate the study of Torah and the performance of mitzvahs, that is, we bring the names of God through our individual characteristics into the place of Mitzrayim, we fulfill the purpose for why the Jewish people went to Mitzrayim, which is to ultimately have that godliness brought into the world, even if it's not evident. But there is an upside, a godly side to Mitzrayim, as it's compared to the stricture and the stricture of the throat that takes the infinity of the intellect and transports it to the character in the heart and ultimately into the expression.